All right, let's do this. Hey guys, I'm Tom the Tech Chap, and this is the new 24-inch Apple iMac. I'm all in on my purple theme today to match the iMac, but the question is, should you buy it? Is it a big upgrade? You'll also notice that the quality of this video is a little bit different because I'm actually shooting all these talking head A-roll shots with the new built-in 1080p FaceTime camera and also using the triple mic array that we get built in. I've got this guy, my usual lavalier mic as a backup, but also if I switch between them, that might give you an idea of how the inbuilt mics compare. But yeah, let me know what you think of the video and audio quality in the comments, and let's dive into this review. Should you buy the new iMac? Okay, I'm not gonna lie, there is something a little bit special about unboxing and setting up the new iMac. From the packaging, to the genuine surprise of just how thin and light this thing is when you pull it out, to the quite literal plug and play setup. You just connect the magnetic power adapter, turn on your Bluetooth keyboard, touchpad and/or mouse, and press the power button. That's it. Oh, and you can also now log in with the Touch ID button on your fancy new color-matched keyboard, which also lets you instantly switch users if your partner or your kids also have a login. So Apple actually sent me the whole shebang for this review. I've got all the peripherals, I've got one of the highest spec iMacs. It's this one with the 8-core CPU and 8-core GPU, also upgraded 16 gigs of RAM and 512 storage. Plus I've got the Touch ID keyboard and both the Magic Mouse and Magic Trackpad. All in, we're looking at about $2,000, although it does start from a slightly less eye-watering £1,250, which is about the same as the new MacBook Pro 13. So there's a lot new here, there's a lot to talk about, and actually if I just shimmy across a little bit and leave room for the full spec list, let's get the specs out of the way first to give you an idea of what we are getting with the new iMac. And also if you guys do enjoy this video and my commitment to the purple theme of actually buying a mug from Anthropology and also a purple shirt, then a like and a subscribe would be lovely. So there's a couple of things that strike me straight away, and firstly, let's talk about this design. And the big question is, why does it matter how thin it is? I mean, unless you're Visa mounting it, normally you do have it. So it's kind of like when you have a ultra thin TV. I've actually got a wall mounted TV currently, but normally it's on a TV stand, and even though you can get those super thin OLEDs, you've still got a big flat stand at the bottom to stop it from falling over. And that's kind of the same situation with the iMac. Yes, the actual computer itself is only 11.5 millimeters thick and it looks amazing, but why is that important? I mean, you still got the stand which sticks out further front and back, so you're not really saving any space, and this drive for ultra thinness means we're still stuck with this big, colorful chin underneath, as that's where all the fans and the components are. If they just made this a couple of centimeters thicker, it could have been all hidden behind the screen, and we'd end up with something that looked more like the Surface Studio instead of an iMac design from 15 years ago that's gone on a bit of a diet. Plus maybe they could have squeezed in a bigger 27-inch screen into this form factor. Instead, if you do want a bigger screen, which personally I do, then you're currently stuck with the last gen Intel-only iMacs. However, one thing I thought I really wouldn't like is this big white bezel around the edge, but actually in person, now it's here next to the colorful chin, I quite like it. There's something about the white with that splash of color and just how insanely thin and light this whole thing is that makes it feel kind of fun and almost uplifting. It's definitely got some Gen Z vibes about it, but even as I get older and more cynical, I do quite like it. Having said that, there's still no rotation or height adjustment, the latter of which I really would like to have seen, so depending on your setup, you may have to stick something underneath it to prop it up. Around the back, we're getting a much darker color, so as you can see I've gone for the purple one here, and it's quite different to the front purple. And in terms of the connectivity, we're getting 2 of the latest Thunderbolt 4 ports, along with 2 USB 3s on this higher end model, although as you can see they're all Type-C, so you'll probably want to plug in an adapter or card reader like you would on a MacBook. And we do get a gigabit Ethernet port, but it's actually hidden back here on the power brick, which I think is a pretty nifty way of keeping the cable out of sight. However, the base iMac does miss out on the 2 USB 3s, and the Ethernet is an optional extra. Also, just a quick mention of the speakers in this thing, because they're ridiculously good. Normally I use a pair of headphones, I'm kitted out with Apple's tech at the moment, but the 6 speaker system combined with the, what do they call it, the force cancelling woofers, which apparently are not anti-Jedi dogs from Star Wars, but it just gives a whole other level to the bass and the richness of the sound. Just have a listen to this.
Flavor little girl talk, don't you?
This chap I've been seeing, John.
Stamos?
No,
His name's John Wings Night.
Like at a sports bar, like Monday night's Wings Night down at PJ Flats.
Would you please stop?
So far, so good then, but we haven't even got to the best bit, the M1 chip. The Apple Silicon, which currently powers the latest MacBook Pro, MacBook Air, and also the Mac Mini, and this is the first time we're getting it in the iMac. Now, to tell you the truth, both my wife and I use MacBook Pro 13s as our sort of everyday laptops. I use the M1 powered version, she has the Intel version, and I tell you what, every single day she complains about how the battery's almost dead, why when she has a billion Chrome tabs open it starts to get hot and the fans whir up. Who'd have thought? But it's a totally different story with the M1 version, which is up to twice as fast, the battery lasts almost twice as long, and it's a lot cooler and quieter, because even though the Pro has a fan, unlike the MacBook Air, I've never actually heard it, even when I'm exporting videos or gaming on this to some extent. So it's genuinely revolutionary stuff, so you can understand why we tech nerds are a bit more excited about Apple's silicon on the inside rather than the fancy, colourful design on the outside. And we're getting essentially the exact same chip and performance as the MacBook Pro 13. Although I was curious, since this 4.5K Retina iMac, which is technically the highest resolution M1 powered device you can get, which therefore has more pixels to push, would it be able to keep up? Well, the answer is yes, actually. It's absolutely the same performance as the MacBook Pro 13. Helpfully, I have identically spec'd machines. These have both got the 8-core CPU, 8-core GPU, and also 16 gig of unified RAM. And I ran a whole bunch of tests on both, and they're pretty much neck and neck in terms of performance. In Geekbench and 3D Mark, the difference is really within the margin of error, and they also both exported my 10-minute 4K Premiere Pro project in exactly 17 minutes and 14 seconds. So whether you go for the MacBook Pro or the iMac or even the Mac Mini, you're really getting the same performance. And while of course we're not going to get the same battery life and to some extent heat and cooling advantages that the M1 brings on the MacBooks, the speed and the efficiency of the chip makes this new iMac worth buying just by itself. Final Cut Pro just breezes through multiple 4K streams in a project. It'll even handle 8K. I do find I still have to use proxies to get a smooth timeline in Premiere Pro with my 10-bit 4K footage, but then again, I have to do the same thing on my top-of-the-line gaming PC as well. So obviously you'll get the best experience with Apple's own suite of apps, and also those that have been fully optimized for the M1, aka universal apps, like Chrome, Photoshop, Affinity Designer, and a whole bunch of Apple Arcade games. You can always check whether your program's running Intel or Apple Silicon with the M1, but more and more programs are becoming universal apps as time goes on, and those that aren't still use Apple's Rosetta 2 emulation software, which translates between Intel and the Apple Silicon. Which at first is what we were all worried would be terrible, but actually most emulated apps on M1 still outperform their native Intel versions. So I've been using this for about a week now. I've been using these MacBook Pros with the M1 since they launched late last year, and I'm genuinely yet to come across a proper roadblock where I can't use a program or app that I want to because of the silicon. Although what I would suggest is paying a little bit extra up front and getting the 16 gig of RAM model, because you can't change it afterwards, it's unified onto the chip. And a couple of times when I was testing the MacBook Air with 8 gigabytes, I did hit a memory limit warning. So considering you're probably going to use this new iMac for the best part of 5 years or more, definitely pay the extra £200 now and get 16 gigs of RAM. It'll make it a lot more future-proof. And sadly, this lack of upgradability is a downside of the M1 design that's not often talked about. Also, gaming still kind of sucks, to be blunt. Serious gaming, that is. I mean, the Apple Arcade is fun and games run flawlessly, but we still have a limited library of traditional games on Mac, and performance is a bit iffy. At Full HD with medium settings in Shadow of the Tomb Raider, I averaged just 25 frames per second. Metro Exodus, same settings, 39 FPS. Not great, not terrible.
Not great, not terrible.
Although I would definitely recommend connecting a PlayStation or Xbox controller if you are going to play some games. So for me, it's that M1 chip on the inside that makes this worth the upgrade. But it's not just that, it's the M1 paired with the latest Big Sur software, which makes this a lot more interesting. Because you can actually run some iPhone and iPad apps, although the selection is pretty limited and I haven't really found this to be particularly useful so far. But as Apple's desktop and mobile worlds continue to merge, particularly with the new iPad Pros also packing an M1 chip, this iMac will be a lot more future-proof than an Intel one. Plus, of course, we have all the usual Apple ecosystem benefits, from your FaceTimes to your AirDrops, handoff, iCloud, synced messages. None of those are unique to this new iMac, but if you are an iPhone or iPad user already, then they are good reasons to use one of these as your desktop computer. It's funny because when I first started this review, I thought this would be pretty straightforward. We've got a new design, bunch of fancy colors, and the M1 chip. But when you start to unpack that, and then you also add in Touch ID keyboard, a much better webcam, great speakers, and upgraded ports, in reality, this is actually a very significant upgrade. But I do have a couple of issues. For example, all the peripherals still charge via Lightning, not USB-C, although they do bundle a USB-C to Lightning connector cable in the box, so I'll let them off, but it just seems a bit old-fashioned. Also, Magic Mouse 2, even though they've gone to the trouble of matching the color, still has this ridiculous charging design. Also, I think as impressively thin as it is, I just don't really care. Make it a bit thicker, stick the fans and components behind it, just get rid of this. And also, unlike a lot of all-in-ones, we're still not getting a touchscreen. So in some ways, an M1 iPad Pro might be a better option for some artists and designers, although that is still limited to iPadOS apps. And speaking of weird transitions, the 27-inch iMac feels a little bit left out. It's not been refreshed yet, and it's still powered by last-gen Intel chips, although it is a lot more configurable, and for professionals that need, 128 gigs of RAM and have much deeper pockets, this is still going to be a better option for now. But I would expect an updated 27-inch or iMac Pro with a faster M1Z or M2 chip coming soon. But for the vast majority of people, even though this new iMac kind of feels like an old design with a fresh lick of paint, it is that new M1 chip with that Big Sur software and a few of the nice extras that does make this, I think, genuinely worth upgrading to. But what do you reckon? Are you tempted to buy this, or maybe wait for the 27-inch or the MacBook Pro 16? Let me know in the comments below. And also, let me know how the audio and the microphone quality has been throughout this video. Thank you so much for watching, guys. If you want to see more of me, then hit that like and subscribe button, and I'll see you next time right here on the Tech Chat.